In this class, we will be learning from Maseches Sotah on Daf Gimel, and this class is dedicated L'Schus Yom Holedes Hershel Avram Haffinger L'Hatzlacha Begashmias V'Ruchnius. In this class, we will learn Daf Gimel of Maseches Sotah. We can break down our Gemara into 4 parts. Number 1, the Gemara will present a series of 9 teachings. Number 2, 5 of these 9 teachings will be Agadita. Number 3, among the other 4 teachings, 3 of the other teachings will be the ones that are mostly discussed. And number 4, one of the teachings will be discussed very extensively, which basically the Gemara will make mention of a certain teaching. And as a result, it'll trigger a side discussion which covers a significant part of today's blot. Our daf begins with a teaching. Tanya, it was taught in a brisa. Hoya Rabbi Meir Omer, Rabbi Meir would say, which seems as if he would say this on a somewhat regular basis. Adam oiver avera baseiser v'Hakadosh Baruch Hu machros olav begolei. A person does an avera in private, and Hashem announces it in public. And he brings a source, shenemar, as it says, v'over olav ruach kina, and it will pass over him, the husband, a spirit of kina, and he will then warn his wife, and the word will get out. And the word that's used over here is v'ovar olav. It says v'ovar. So says Rabbi Meir, and avira, the word, the root of v'ovar, which would be avira, means announcing, as it says, shenemar vayitzav Moshe vayaviru kol b'machane. Moshe Rabbeinu commanded, and they announced it in the whole camp. And what he commanded was that the Yidden should stop bringing donations to the Mishkan since they already had enough. So we see that the word vayaviru means to announce. So to here, when it says va'avar, what it's teaching us over here, what the Torah is communicating is that the woman behaved in a way of hepech hatznius, in an immodest manner, in private. And va'avar, this comes from Hashem. This is Hashem bringing the spirit on the husband, and in this way, it's bringing about that it should be announced in public. The Gemara proceeds to present a second teaching. Reish Lakish Amar, Reish Lakish said, Ein Adam Oiver Avera, Elim Kein Nichnas by Ruach Shtus. A person only does an Avera if a Ruach Shtus, a spirit of foolishness, enters him. And he brings a proof, Shenemar, as it says in the Pasuk, Ish Ki Sishte Ishtoi, that his wife goes astray. And Reish Lakish focuses on that it says Sishte. It says the word sishte, which is similar to shtus. The pasuk could have said ki site ishtoi, that his wife goes astray. We could have used site without the sin. What that comes to allude is that when this wife goes astray by doing an avera, it's considered, and it happens because of a ruach shtus that entered her. So it uses the word sishte to reference and to allude to the word shtus. The Gemara proceeds to present another teaching. Tana de Bei Rabbi Yishmael. A brisa was taught in Bei Rabbi Yishmael, and the brisa asks a question: Mipnei mahe mina Torah eid echad b'Sotah. What's the reason the Torah believed one eid by a Sotah? Generally speaking, we need 2 eidim to believe something. By a Sotah, if one eid testifies that the woman did an avera, then we believe this aid, and as a result, the woman is no longer able to absolve herself of this guilt by drinking the waters of the Sotah, and the husband has to divorce her. What's the reason 1 aid is enough over here? And the brisa answers, Sheraglayim adavar, because there are legs, there is support to the matter, for us to believe that she did an avera. And the background and the support, the additional evidence that we have here, that as a result, we believe even 1 aid, Sharei kinala v'nistera v'aid echad me'ida shehi tmeya. Since he warned her, the husband warned his wife, and she secluded herself, and 1 witness is testifying against her. And because we have an accumulation of evidence, that's why by Sotah we have something unique, that even 1 aid is believed if he testifies that she did the avera. The Gemara now proceeds to present a question. Omar le Rav Papa la Abaya, Rav Papa said to Abaya, V'hakiksi v'kinoi, but where is her warning written in the Torah? The warning in the Torah, if we open up the Torah, is Basar Stira V'tuma Hu Dechsiva. But her warning is only mentioned in the Torah after her seclusion seclusion and doing of the Avera. So how can we say that the Sotah had kinui followed by stira, and then the Avera? If we open up the Torah, we see that kinui is only spoken about later on, after stira and tuma. So how can we say over here that we have all of this evidence beforehand? And the Gemara presents the answer. Amar lei, Abaya said to Rav Papa, va'avar, when it says in the pasuk later on, va'avar olav ruach kina, it means ukvar avar. It means that it already happened. It doesn't mean that it then later on it happened va'avar, but rather it means it happened earlier on. The Gemara asks a question on this answer. Ela me'ato. So now, when the Torah says, va'avar lochem kol chalutz hachinami, does that also mean it already happened? When Moshe Rabbeinu instructed the Shevet of Bnei Ruvain, Gad, and half of Menashe, they wanted to stay on the Mizrach, on the east of the Yarden. They wanted the pasture that was there. And Moshe Rabbeinu told them, he spoke harshly against them, and they then volunteered to lead the war into Eretz Yisrael when the time would come. Moshe Rabbeinu told them that when that will happen, va'avar lochem kol chalutz, all of your armed men will go in front. Does that mean it already happened also? Because the word va'avar is used. Obviously, that's not what it means over there. And the Gemara answers that we have to look at the context. Over there, by va'avar kol chalutz, since it says v'nichbesha aretz lifnei Hashem va'achar tashuvu, the land will be conquered in front of Hashem, and then you will return. Clearly, it means in the future. So it clearly refers to the future. That's how we understand va'avar over there. And over here, when it says va'avar olav ruach kina, also the context informs us what it means. If you'll think it means the future, that in the future a spirit of kinui will come over the husband, what would be the purpose of a warning of this kinui after seclusion and the Avera? It doesn't make any sense. So it has to be that it means va'avar ukvar avar, that it already happened. The Gemara now proceeds to present another teaching from the Bei Rabbi Yishmael, and this is its fourth teaching. Tana de Bei Rabbi Yishmael, a brisa was taught in Bei Rabbi Yishmael. Ein adam mekana leishtoi elim kein nichnasei bei ruach. A man, a person, does not warn his wife unless a spirit enters him. And he brings a source, shenemar, as it says in the pasuk, va'avar olav ruach kina v'kina is ishtoi. So we see a certain spirit came upon the person that caused him to be mekana, to warn his wife. The Gemara inquires, and has a shaila, my ruach, what spirit is this referring to? And the Gemara presents two answers, two responses. Rabbanan Amri, the Rabbanan say, ruach tuma, it's a spirit of tuma, of impurity. And Rav Ashi Amar, and Rav Ashi said, ruach tara, it's a spirit of purity, of tara. And the Gemara proceeds to present a proof and support for the opinion of Rav Ashi that it's a ruach tara. And the Gemara says, "Mistaber commander Omar ruach tara." It makes sense that it goes according to the opinion that says it's a spirit of tara, of purity. And the reason we say this is the Tanya for was taught in a brisa. The pasuk says v'kinei is ishtoi, and there's a machlekes here. Rabbi Yishmael says it's rishus. The Torah here is giving permission. It's optional. It's voluntary. A person's permitted and able to warn his wife. Rabbi Kiva argues, and Rabbi Kiva says choiva. It's not just that a person's permitted and it's optional and voluntary, but rather it's an obligation. Under certain circumstances, if all the conditions are in place, a person is obligated to warn his wife. And the Gemara now explains how we extract from this brisa a support for Rav Ashi, and that's why it's in the gray box with the arrow pointing upwards, because it's explaining it. The Gemara says, "I amris b'shlema ruach tara." If you say it's a ruach tara, then it makes sense. It makes sense that Rabbi Yishmael says that kinoi, a warning, is voluntary, and Rabbi Kiva says it's a chayva, it's an obligation. However, I amris ruach tuma. But if it's a ruach tuma, if you're going to say that's what it is, so does it make sense to be a reshus or chayva? Are we going to say it's optional, a person has permission, and even more so it's an obligation to bring upon himself a ruach tuma, a spirit of impurity? So clearly we see from here that that this brisa supports the opinion of Rav Ashi that it's a ruach tara, and that's why Rabbi Yishmael says it's optional, which means it's perfectly fine to do it, and Rabbi Akiva even goes further and says it's actually an obligation. Having mentioned this machlekes between Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva, whether v'kines ishtay is a reshus or a chayva, the Gemara now proceeds to further discuss this machlekes as well as other similar machlekes that we find between Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva, and this will actually be the biggest portion, take up the biggest portion of our daf. And the Gemara says, Gufa, let's look at this teaching itself. We find that Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva have three such arguments. The Torah says, v'kines ishtay. Over there, Rabbi Yishmael says, reshus, it's optional. A person's being given permission. That's what Rabbi Yishmael says. Rabbi Akiva says, chayva, it's an obligation. A person has to warn his wife under those conditions. We find a similar argument elsewhere. It says, lo yatama. This refers to a kohen who's forbidden to become tamei to a dead person. The Torah says that there are a number of exceptions. The Torah says, in the pasuk at the end, it says, to his sister, which is a psula that was never married to any man. And it says over there, lo yatama, to her, he becomes tamei. Rabbi Yishmael says, reshus, the Torah is giving a man permission, is giving a kohen permission to become tamei to these family members. Rabbi Akiva says, chayva, it's not permission that's being granted, but rather, it's an obligation. He has to become tamei to these family members. And then the third place is, it says regarding owning a slave, a non-Jewish slave, it says, L'olam behem ta'aveidu. You should treat them as slaves forever, permanently. A person shouldn't free his non-Jewish slave. Over here we have the same argument again. Rabbi Yishmael says, reshus. The Torah here is giving a person permission to do this. He doesn't have to. And Rabbi Akiva says, chayva, it's an obligation. So we have these three very similar arguments between Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva. And the Gemara now is going to proceed to ask a question on this, and then it'll go into each one of these arguments in great detail. So the Gemara quoted these three arguments in order to lead into a question. It says, Gufa, this teaching itself, let's analyze it. And the question is, the Gemara asks, Amrli Rav Papa la Abaya. Rav Papa said to Abaya, and the Gemara says, Va'amri la, others say, it wasn't Rav Papa who said it to Abaya, but rather it was Rav Mesharshio said it l'Rava to Rava. And the question is as follows: Lema Rabbi Yishmael v'Rabbi Akiva b'chol ha'Torah kula hachi pligi? Will we say that Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva argue about this throughout the whole Torah, that everywhere in the Torah that there's an instruction? This is going to be the argument. The Mar Amar Rishus, that Rabbi Yishmael is going to say the Torah is giving a person permission, is giving it's an optional, voluntary thing. Umar Amar Chayva, and Rabbi Akiva is going to say it's an obligation. That doesn't make any sense. To say that Rabbi Yishmael will hold that every single time the Torah gives an instruction, it's reshus, it's optional. Obviously, that's not the opinion of Rabbi Yishmael. So then, how do we understand that over here, Rabbi Yishmael says that these specific instructions are optional? The person is being given permission to do them. How do we understand that? And the Gemara answers, Omar Lei, Abaya said to Rav Papa, it's only here that they argue. Hacha bekrei pligi. It's only here that they argue about these psukim. In other words, what he's answering, as we'll see, is that in these instances there is a context, which means in all of these cases, if not for the pasuk, we would think, as the Gemara is going to proceed and explain all of this, if not for the pasuk over here, we would think it's forbidden. So when the Torah tells us that to do it, to be done, all we know is it's not forbidden, it's permitted. But we don't have the additional information that not only is it permitted, but it's actually even an obligation. And therefore, as we're going to see, we're going to have to then understand the opinion of Rabbi Akiva. How does he take it so far to say that not only is it permitted, but it's even an obligation? The Gemara now begins to go through each one of these arguments. We said v'kines ishtay. When it says v'kines ishtay, Rabbi Yishmael says reshus, a person has permission to warn his wife, and Rabbi Akiva says chayva, it's an obligation. And the Gemara is quoting this to lead into its inquiry. My taima, the Rabbi Yishmael. What's the reason of Rabbi Yishmael that he says over here that it's only permission being given. And the Gemara answers that Savar Loki Hai Tana, he holds like the following Tana. The Tanya, it was taught in a Brisa. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says the Torah's instruction over here, V'kinis Ishtay, is written in the context, the following context. Since the Torah says, Lo sisna es achicha bilvavecha, you should not hate your brother in your heart. So you would think that this is an example of such a thing. This is an instance. A person shouldn't warn his wife because it's creating hatred. You'd think the same applies here. Therefore, it says v'kinei. So in other words, what Rabbi Yishmael is saying is that if not for this pasuk, it's not that we would think a person could warn his wife, and now the pasuk's telling us he's obligated to, but rather we would think it's forbidden for a person to warn his wife. And the Torah is telling us v'kinei. All we know then is that it's permitted. We don't have an extra instruction to tell us that not only is it permitted, it's actually also an obligation. This now leads into a question. So really this question should come out of the green answer, the response, because that's what triggers it. However, we put it over where it is now simply because it's more organized. So it would be more authentic and fitting with the actual flow to come out of the response. It's put this way just that it's more clear and they're side by side. And the Gemara asks, Rabbi Kiva, what does he say about this point? It's a good point, that if not for V'kinei, we'd think it's forbidden. So once the Torah says V'kinei, all we know is that it's permitted. We don't know that it's an obligation. And the Gemara answers that he agrees with the basic idea that we're mentioning now. However, he has a response, and that is Kinoi Achrinoksiv. It says V'kinei twice. There's another V'kinei. It says in the pasuk, V'avar alav ruach kina v'kinei es ishtay v'hi nitma. Oy avar alav ruach kina v'kinei es ishtay v'hi loy nitma. It says twice v'kinei. Why twice? Once is to tell us that it's rishus, it's permitted, and then the second time that it says it is for a chayva. So first we think it's forbidden. It says the Torah v'kinei. We know now that it's permitted. It says v'kinei again. It's telling us that not only is it permitted, it's actually an obligation. This now triggers a question on Rabbi Yishmael, and the Gemara asks for Rabbi Yishmael, and Rabbi Yishmael, what does he say? There's a good point over here. It says v'kinei twice, and the Gemara answers, "Aidi de boy lemichta v'hi nitma v'hi loy nitma ksiv nami v'kinei." Since the Torah wants to say v'hi nitma and v'hi loy nitma, it's giving two possible things that could have happened. So therefore, the Torah also says the words v'kinei again as well. So in other words, the Torah could have said v'avar olav ruach kina v'kinei es ishtay. A spirit of kina came over him and he warned his wife v'hi nitma oi v'hi loy nitma. But since it's presenting two different possibilities, the Torah repeats the entire sentence over again, and it says sentence 1 v'avar olav ruach kina v'kinei es ishtay v'hi nitma. And then sentence 2, and the Gemara brings a source that it's an appropriate way of understanding the Torah to say that the Torah will repeat a whole sentence for the one thing in it that it wants to teach us. And he says, and this is going to be repeated a number of times, and this is always the final answer for Rabbi Yishmael, as we'll see. This is l'chadetana debei Rabbi Yishmael. This fits in accordance with a brisa that was taught in Bei Rabbi Yishmael, and the brisa says as follows: Kol parsha shenemra v'nishnis le'nishnis ela b'shvil davar shenis chadash ba. Any parsha that was taught and repeated was only repeated for the thing that the novel teaching which is in it, the new teaching in it. We don't say that every part of the teaching has to be explained. Every part of that parsha needs to be explained, but rather we say that whole parsha was possibly repeated for the one item in it that's being taught and is a new thing. And all the words surrounding that are just there for the repetition so that it goes more smoothly, for the way that it's written, for the way that it's read. But it's possible to say that only one part of the parsha is teaching us something new. So to briefly summarize this one machlekes between Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva, if not for anything being written about kinui, we'd say it's forbidden because the Torah tells us leisisnas achicha bilvavecha. Now the Torah comes and says v'avar olav ruach kina v'kinei. Now we know it's not forbidden; it's permitted. We don't have an obligation. Then it says again v'avar olav ruach kina v'kinei. So Rabbi Akiva says this comes to tell us not only is it permitted, it's an obligation. And Rabbi Shmuel says no, it was only repeated for something else that's mentioned there, which is new. And that's the only thing that we need to explain in that pasuk. We don't have to now explain also why is it written a second time, V'kinei, and to say that must be teaching us something. It's teaching us that it's an obligation. No, we could disregard that and not have to attribute any meaning to it. The Gemara now proceeds to present the second case where they argue. The Torah says, Lo Yitama, that a kohen becomes tamei to his family members. Rabbi Shmuel said that it's reshus. It's voluntary. The kohen is being given permission to do so. Rabbi Kiva says, chayva, it's an obligation. So the Gemara leads into its question and says, my time of the Rabbi Shmuel, what's the reason of Rabbi Shmuel? And again, the Gemara tells us, it's the context over here that matters. And that is, Aidi dechsiv, Emer l'kohen b'nei Aaron, v'amarta aleim l'nefesh lo yitama ba'amav. Since it says to the Kehanim, it says that the Kehanim may not become tamei. Therefore, it says lo yitama, to tell us to these people he's not forbidden. There's no isser to become tamei. When we take away the isser, what we're left with is reshus. It's permitted to be done, but we don't have an obligation here. This now leads into a side question, and again, the question should really come out of the response, because that's what triggers it. And the Gemara says, Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Akiva, what does he say to this point? Before the Torah says, Lo Yitama, as far as we know, it's prohibited. It's prohibited. It's forbidden. So Lo Yitama only serves to say it's permitted. We don't have a chayva. And the Gemara answers, Meki'im l'sheirei nafka. He actually learns it out from Ki'im l'sheirei. From there he learns out that it's permitted for a kohen to make himself tamei to family members. The Torah says, Ki'im l'sheirei hakarev elav, to his flesh that he is near, li'imay ula'aviv v'livnoi ula'vitay ula'achiv ula'achaisai apsula. The Torah already gives permission for that from the words Ki'im l'sheirei. If that's the case, lo yitama lomali, why do we need the words lo yitama? We already know it's permitted. Says Rabbi Akiva will say, l'chayva. It's to teach us that it's an obligation. So first the Torah says it's permitted by saying, Ki'im l'sheirei hakarev elav. He's permitted to make himself tamei to those people. And by the Torah adding and saying, lo yitama, it's coming to say not only is it permitted, it's actually an obligation. And this now triggers a side question. And the Gemara asks for Rabbi Yishmael, and Rabbi Yishmael, what is he going to say to this? We don't just have Ki'im l'sheirei, which teaches us that it's permitted. We also have Lo Yitama, which would seem to now have a new teaching to it, which should be that not only is it permitted, it's also a chayva, an obligation. And the Gemara answers that Rabbi Yishmael learns an entirely different teaching from Lo Yitama. He says Ki'im l'sheirei teaches us that it's permitted, and Lo Yitama teaches us Lo Yitama, to her. Lo mitame, to her he may make himself tamei. The kohen may make himself tamei to these family members. Ve'ein mitame le'evareho, but he may not make himself tamei to her evarim. That if one of these family members loses a limb, the kohen may not become tamei to them. It's only if they pass away, but not if one of the limbs comes off. In such a case, the kohen cannot make himself tamei to those limbs. Just to mention that it would come out from here, this is what it appears at least, that now it's not that Rabbi Yishmael says Lo Yitama is Rishus. He actually says Lo Yitama is teaching something entirely different. It's Ki'im L'Sheirei, which is Rishus. That pasuk that says Ki'im L'Sheirei HaKarev Elov, that to her he's allowed to become Tameh, that's what Rabbi Yishmael interprets to be Rishus. And now this triggers a question in Rabbi Akiva, so it should really come out to the right of this answer. But it was placed over here, just in this set under Rabbi Akiva, so it's more organized and we can see how it fits under him. And the Gemara asks of Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Akiva, what does he say to this? We have this teaching. How do we know that he can make himself tamei to her and not to her limbs? It would seem to be learned out from Lo Yitama, and if that's the case, then we don't have an extra pasuk to teach us that it's a chayva. And the Gemara answers, Im kein lichtev rachman Allah v'lishtek. If that's the case, the Torah should say la to her, and we know to her he becomes tameh. Tameh. There's no need to say la yitama. Yitama lamali. Why do we need the word yitama? Yitama. It's an extra word, and therefore says Rabbi Akiva, Shma Mina. Rabbi Akiva will say, Shma Mina. From here we can learn that it's teaching us another thing, that it's a chayva, it's an obligation. So it comes out that Rabbi Akiva learns that from Ki'im L'Sheirei we learn that it's permitted. From the word Yitama we learn that it's an obligation. And from law we learn to her and not to her Eivarim, not to her limbs. And this again triggers a question, Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Yishmael, and once again it should come out of the answer because that's what triggers this question. And Rabbi Yishmael, what does he say to this? The word Yitama is extra. Why was it written? It would seem that it's written in order to teach us that it's a chayva. And the Gemara answers, like we said earlier, Aidi the kasav la, kasav nami Yitama. Since the Torah wrote the word la, it also wrote the word Yitama. And like we said earlier, this is l'chadetani the Bei Rabbi Yishmael, like the brisa that was taught in Bei Rabbi Yishmael. And the brisa says, "Kol parsha shenem rav nishnis." Any parsha that was said and then repeated, le nishnis ela bishvil davar shenis chadash ba, was only repeated for the thing that's new in it, the new and novel teaching that's contained in it. And therefore, since we need the word law to teach us something, the fact that the Torah adds the word yitama doesn't serve to teach us anything, but rather it was just added as part of that sentence. And it says la will naturally add on to her what? To her yitama. He may make himself tamei. The Gemara now proceeds to the third and final case where Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva argue. It says, Lo'olam behem ta'aveidu. You should make them to be slaves for you on a permanent basis. Rabbi Yishmael says, Rishus. Here the Torah is giving permission for such a thing to be done. Rabbi Akiva says, Chayva, it's an obligation that a person should take them as slaves on a permanent basis. The Gemara quotes it to lead into its question. My time at Rabbi Yishmael, what's the reason of Rabbi Yishmael to interpret this pasuk as Rishus, as permission? And the Gemara answers, because if not for this, like we said earlier, we think it's forbidden. Why is that? So the Gemara says, since the pasuk tells us not to let any of the 7 nations in Eretz Canaan live, so you would think that in this case a person cannot take this individual as a slave. He's not allowed to let him live. As we'll see that this person is connected to the Shiva Umes. Therefore, therefore the Torah also needs to write, you're allowed to take them as slaves on a permanent basis. They don't have to be killed, but not that a person has to take them as slaves on a permanent basis. What's this case referring to? It's like it says over here, to permit a ben Kananis. It's referring to a case that one of the nations outside of the Shiva Umes had a child together with a woman that's from the Shiva Umes. And the Torah is informing us that although generally a Yid is instructed not to let any of the Shiva Umes live, in this case, since the father is not from the Shiva Umes, it's permitted to take this person as a slave and he doesn't have to be killed. And the Gemara concludes by presenting a source that communicates this point as well. It says in a brisa, it was taught in a brisa, we'll just read the pasuk that this is going to be referencing. It says, V'gam ibnei ha'toishavim hagarim imchem, even from the sons of the Teshavim that live with you, which refers to the Shiva Umeis, mehem tiknu, from them you're allowed to purchase slaves, umim mishpachtam, and from their families, asher yimachem, that are with you, asher helidu ba'artzachem, that they gave birth to in your land, v'hayu lochem la'achuzah. So when it says, how do we know? So the Brisa says, how do we know that one may buy a ben Knanis when the mother is a Knanis and the father isn't? Because it says, v'gam b'nei atei hagar mimchem, even from their children, a yid is allowed to take them as a slave. The Brisa continues, so you may think, and this is not connected to our Gemara, you may think one may buy a ben Knani. What if the father is from the Shiva Umes and not the mother? Do we say the same thing then? And the Brisa says, no. It says in the pasuk, in the conclusion, asher helidu ba'artzachem, that they were born in your land, but they don't live in your land. And the reason is because the child would go to where the father is from. So these were only born in Eretz Yisrael, but they didn't end up living there. So that would apply when the father is from one of the other nations, the mother is from the Shiva Umes. So the child was born in Eretz Canaan, in Eretz Yisrael, but the child's not going to live in Eretz Yisrael, since the father will take him back from his country. So we know that only a ben Knanis and not a ben Knani. At any rate, what's relevant here is just to show that we need a special permission from the Torah to take a ben Knanis when the father is not from the Shiva Umes and the mother is, as a slave. This now triggers a question, and again, it should really come out of the response. Rabbi Akiva, what does he say to this? We do need the pasuk to give us permission, because otherwise we think it's forbidden. So how do we have a chayva? And the Gemara answers, Mimehem tiknu nafka, lo'olam bem ta'avaydu lamali. When it says mehem tiknu, from there we already take out, from there we already learn out that it's permitted for a yid to take as a slave one of these individuals. Lo'elam bem tavedu, the words lo'elam bem tavedu lamali, what do I need it for? It's extra. And says Rabbi Akiva, l'chayva, it's to teach us that not only is it permitted to work them as slaves on a permanent basis, it's actually an obligation. So we have a second pasuk for it. And this now triggers a question on Rabbi Yishmael. And the Gemara asks, Rabbi Yishmael, what does he say to this? We see that we have two psukim, and the Gemara answers, Bahem v'loy ba'achechem. Rabbi Yishmael learns from Mehem Tiknu that it's permitted to purchase from these people as slaves on a permanent basis. When it says Lohelam Bahem Ta'aveidu, that's teaching us something else. It's teaching us Bahem, and them you could make them work as slaves, like it says in the pasuk, in a way that's avodas parach, very difficult labor. V'loy ba'achechem, but not with your brothers, not with a yid. A yid is not permitted to make his brother, another yid, work in a way that's considered very tirdei b'farach, that it's very difficult for him. So that's what we learn from Bahem. So it'll come out again, according to this, it would seem that Rabbi Yishmael is not saying that Lo'olam Bahem Ta'aveidu is Rishus. He's saying Lo'olam Bahem Ta'aveidu teaches us something else. It's from Mehem Tiknu that's Rishus. And Lo'olam Bahem Ta'aveidu maybe is referring to that Rishus, but it's not the pasuk that's the source for it. Lo'olam Bahem Ta'aveidu is simply teaching us Bahem v'loy ba'achechem. This now triggers a question again, and the Gemara says, Rabbi Akiva, what does he say to this? We need Lo'olam Bahem Ta'aveidu. It's not an extra pasuk. It's for Bahem v'loy ba'achechem. And the Gemara says, no, we don't need Lo'olam Bahem Ta'aveidu for that. Because if you look at the pasuk, it says, Lo'olam Bahem Ta'aveidu, Uva'achechem b'nei Yisrael, ish ba'achiv le'sirda by befarach. It already says, Uva'achechem b'nei Yisrael, ish ba'achiv le'sirda by befarach. It's written clearly. We don't need Lo'olam Bahem v'lei ba'achechem. We don't need that. So he says, Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Akiva, what's he going to say? And the Gemara says, Ba'achechem m'seifa dekron afka. The din regarding your brothers, that you can't make them work avodas parach, we learn it from the end of that pasuk. It says clearly right afterwards, Uva'achechem b'nei Yisrael, ish ba'achiv le'sirda by befarach. And if that's the case, Lo'olam Bahem Ta'aveidu is extra, and it teaches us that when it says Mehem Tiknu, which is giving permission for it, the Torah says Lo'olam Bahem Ta'aveidu, it's also a chayva. And once again, this triggers a question in Rabbi Yishmael, and the Gemara asks for Rabbi Yishmael, and Rabbi Yishmael, what's he going to say to this? We have the words of Achechem B'nai Yisrael, Ish ba'achiv le'sirda by befarech, so we already know this din. So the words Lo'elam Behem Tavedu are extra, and therefore it would seem that they're needed to teach another teaching, which would be that it's an obligation, it's a chayva. And the Gemara answers, similar to the previous ones, that Aidi dechsiv uva'achechem ksiv nami bohem, that Lo'elam Behem Tavedu is only written as part of the pasuk, it's just there as part of the sentence, but we learn nothing from it. But rather, since the pasuk is going to teach us Uva'achechem b'nei Yisrael, that with a fellow yid, the din is le'sirda by befarech. So as part of that sentence, it says beforehand, Lo'olam bahem ta'aveidu. You're allowed to make them into slaves on a permanent basis, as opposed, in contrast to Uva'achechem b'nei Yisrael, where there we say le'sirda by befarech. But there's nothing actually learned out of those words. They just get included as part of this entire pasuk. And again, we quote the Brisa, L'chadetana Debei Rabbi Yishmael, that called Parsha Shenemra V'nishnis, any Parsha that was said and then repeated, Le'nishnis Ela B'shvil Davar Shenis Chadish Ba, it was only repeated for the thing that was taught new of it in it, but not for every part of it. And therefore, we don't have to learn anything from Lo'elam Behem Tavedu, we just need one thing to be new in the pasuk, and we have that, and that is Uva'achechem B'nei Yisrael, Le'sirda by Befarech, that this type of slavery is not permitted to be done from one yid to another. The Gemara now proceeds to present a fifth teaching, and the previous part, because of the length of it, is just removed over here so it doesn't get in the way. And the Gemara says, Amar Rav Chizda. It's two teachings, one in succession to the other, so we put them into one, both from Rav Chizda, both on the same topic. Amar Rav Chizda said, Znusa bevesa ki karya l'shumshama. Znus in a home is like a carrier worm to sesame, that it totally destroys it. V'amar Rav Chizda, and Rav Chizda said, Tukfa bebesa ki karya l'shumshama. Anger in a home is like a carrier worm to sesame, that it completely destroys it. And the Gemara concludes and makes a comment about these teachings. Idi v'idi be'itzisa, aval begavra leslan ba. Both of these, about the destruction to a home of znus and anger, were said by a woman. When a woman has these things, then it will destroy a home. But not by a man. By the man, it doesn't have that type of impact on the home. The Gemara proceeds to present a sixth teaching, and this is also from Rav Chizda. V'amar Rav Chizda, and Rav Chizda said, Batchila koydem shechatu Yisrael, originally before the Yidden sinned with znus, so he says Shechina sheirem kol echad ve'echad. The Shechina rested, the Shechina dwelt with each and every one, like it says, Ki Hashem alekecha mishalech bekerev machanecha. But kevan shechatu, after the Yidden sinned, since they sinned, nistalko Shechina mehem, the Shechina departed from them. Like it says in the pasuk, V'lo yira b'cha ervas davar v'shov ma'acharecha, that in order not to see any form of znus, the Shechina departs and departed from the Yidden. The Gemara now presents a seventh teaching. Amar Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani, Amar Rabbi Yonasan. He says, Kolo oise mitzvah achas ba'ilam hazeh. Anyone who does even a single mitzvah in oilam hazeh, in this world, mikadamtoi v'hileches lefonav lo'ilam haba. It precedes him, it goes before him in oilam haba. Like it says in the pasuk, v'holach lefonecha tzidkecha. Your righteousness, which means your good deeds, they go in front of you. They will go in front of you. And it continues and says on the other end, and anyone who does a single avera in Eilam Hazeh, it envelops him and it goes in front of him to Yom Adin, to the day of judgment. And again, he brings a pasuk, Shenemar, like it says in the pasuk, Yiloftu orches darkom, their ways will envelop them. Yalu batayu veyevedu. It refers to Gehenim. So we see that the Averas of a person also follow him. And the Gemara concludes with a related teaching. Rabbi Lezer says that kshura baike kelev, that this avera is attached to the person like a dog. We find this by Yosef. It says in the pasuk, he brings a pasuk, v'lo shama eilel lishkav etzla liyos ima. Yosef didn't listen to the wife of Potiphar. So the teaching goes, it says lishkav etzla means in olam hazeh, and liyos ima means in olam haba. So we see that the avera stays with the person, and it precedes him and goes before him, and it's kshura by kekelev. It's attached to him like a dog, even in the next world. The Gemara now presents an eighth teaching, and this teaching is connected to what we learned earlier, that by Tumah one aid is believed. And the reason is, since we already have kinui and we have stira, so even if only one aid testifies that the woman did an avera, since there's so much evidence against her, we'll even believe one aid. So the Gemara presents a related Mishnah. Tanan Hassam was taught in a Mishnah over there. The Mishnah says it would be logical, Shahaya Bedin, from a Kavol Chemer, not to trust one aid by Tumah. And what's the Kavol Chemer? The Kavol Chemer is as follows. If the first edus, and this refers to the edus of stira, that the wife secluded herself, if the first edus, that doesn't make her permanently usher, it doesn't have such a great impact, it only makes her temporarily usher, that if she doesn't drink the Sotah waters, she'll remain usher, but if she wants, she could drink the Sotah waters and become permitted. So if the first edus, that doesn't make her permanently usher, cannot be established with less than 2 edim, so the Kavol Chemer would say, then the last edus that makes her permanently usher, so it has a much greater impact, should not be able to be established with less than 2 edim. It has much greater of an impact. It should need just as much support. Talmud Leimer, therefore the Torah says, Ve'ed ein ba. There are not 2 edim that she did in Avera. There's only one, and we believe him. And we should not make that Kavol Chemer. But now that we said this, there's a reverse Kavol Chemer. Now we have a Kavol Chemer from the last edus to the first edus. And the Kavol Chemer says as follows. If the last edus, the edus that the wife did in Avera, that does make her permanently usher, it has such a great impact. Nevertheless, we say it's established with 1 aid. If that's the case, then the first edus that doesn't make her permanently usher, it doesn't have such a great impact, so then that edus should certainly be established with 1 aid. Talmud Leimer, therefore the Torah says, it teaches us this is not the case. How does it teach it to us? It says, by znus, by arayus, ki matza ba ervas davar. He found with her ervas davar, uses the word davar. And later it says, this is written by murder, al pi shnayim edim, or al pi shleisha edim, yakum davar. The davar, the matter, could only be established either by 2 witnesses or 3 witnesses. So we have Gzeir Shav over here, davar. Just like there, by Al pi shnayim edim, or shleisha edim, it's based on 2 edim. So too here, where it says the word davar, it's based only on 2 edim. So that's the entirety of the Mishnah. The Gemara proceeds to ask a question on this Mishnah. And the question is, do we learn this out of ki matza ba'ervas davar? Is that where we learn out that we need 2 edim for the stira? We learn it out from ba. We learned earlier, the eid ein ba, there are not 2 edim by the tumah, only 1 eid, and that's good enough. But we learned ba. This is how one of the opinions in the Mishnah, ba v'loy bekinui, and not by kinui. By the kinui, by the warning, there are 2 edim. And ba v'loy bestira, ba, by the tumah there are not 2 edim, and not by the stira. By the stira there are 2 edim. So why does the Mishnah over here say we learn it out from this Gzeir Shava? And the Gemara answers, that's exactly what the Tana did say. The way we have to read the Mishnah is that it says as follows. We learn from ba that it's ba v'loy bekinui and ba v'loy bestira. When it says therefore the Torah says is about a different matter. And that's saying as follows. And from where do we know that in all cases of znus we don't believe 1 aid? So whether it's inserted here into the Mishnah, whatever the case is, the Gemara is telling us the right way to learn the Mishnah is, therefore the Torah says ba not by kinui and ba not by stira. By stira you need 2 edim. And then there's another question inserted into the Mishnah. And where do we know that in general, 1/8 is not believed? In general by Znus, because over here we have 1/8 is being believed. Where do we know in general is not believed? That we learn from the Gzeira Shava of Kimotza Ba'ervas Davar and Al Pishnayim Edim or Ishleisha Edim Yakum Davar. That just like over there you need 2 or 3 Edim, you need 2 Edim, so too by Znus you need 2 Edim. And the Gemara concludes, and it goes all the way to the next Amud. The Gemara concludes by presenting a brisa that's related to this and also includes a new teaching. Tana Rabbanon, the Rabbanon taught in a brisa. Ezuhu Eidus Harishena. And the Mishnah referred to the first Eidus, the last Eidus. Says the brisa, Ezuhu Eidus Harishena. What is the first Eidus? Zu Eidus Stira. This is the Eidus that the wife secluded herself. Eidus Achrona. What is the last Eidus? Zu Eidus Tuma. This is the Eidus that the wife did in Avera. The Brisa now continues and presents a machlekes that's found between 9 different opinions. And says, V'kama shir stira. What's the shir of stira? What's the amount of time that's in the first Eidus of stira? And the Brisa says, we're going to read it this way just because it's more clear. Kedei Tuma. It's the amount of time it takes for Tumah to do an Avera. Kedei Bia, which is the amount of time that it takes for Bia. Kedei Ha'ara, which is the amount of time that it takes for Ha'ara, which is the beginning of Bia. And what's that amount of time? And there we find 9 opinions. Rabbi Shmuel says it's Kedei HaKafes Dekel, the amount of time it takes to circle a palm tree. Rabbi Lezer says Kedei Mezigas HaKais, the amount of time it takes to mix a cup. It means the wine in those days was very strong. They would pour in water. That's Mezigas HaKais. Rabbi Yeshua says Kedei L'shtoisei, the amount of time it takes to drink that cup. Ben Azai says it's Kedei Litzleis Beitza, the amount of time it takes to roast an egg. Rabbi Akiva says it's Kedei L'goima, the amount of time it takes to swallow the egg. Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira says Kedei L'gmoya Shalish Beitzim Zu Achar Zu, the amount of time it takes to swallow 3 eggs, one after the other. Rabbi Elazar ben Yirmiyah says Kedei Likshar Gardi Nima. It's the amount of time that it takes for a Gardi, a weaver, Likshar, to tie Nima, a string. Chonin ben Pinchas says it's Kedei Shetoishit Yada L'seich Pia Litol Kesam. It's the amount of time it takes a woman to extend her hand into her mouth to take out a piece of wood. Plimui says it's Kedei Shetoishit Yada Lasal Litol Kikar. It's the amount of time it takes a woman to extend her hand into a basket to take a loaf of bread. And the Brisa concludes with a support to Plimu's opinion, Afal Pisha in Raya Ladavar, even though there's no proof that this is the right amount of time, Zeichel Ladavar, it's alluded to, because it says, Ki ba'ad isha zoina ad kikar lechem. The pasuk makes a connection, it puts in the same place, Isha Zoina and Kikar Lechem, to teach us it's the amount of time that it takes to take a loaf of bread out of a basket.